Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Iowa Learning Farms Conservation Webinar Series. I'm Liz Ripley, the Conservation and Cover Crop Outreach Specialist with Iowa Learning Farms. We're thrilled to have you join us today with Dr. Hongli Feng, Assistant Professor in the Department of Economics and Center for Agriculture and Rural Development here at Iowa State University, as we explore agriculture and solar farms, preferences for utility-scale solar energy in local communities. If you have attended a previous webinar, thank you and welcome to those of you that are joining for the first time. If you have questions for Dr. Feng, you can submit them via the chat and we will get to those questions following the presentation. So with that, Dr. Hongli, your virtual floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Liz. So hello, everyone. I'm going to share some of my research related to perspectives about solar farms and land use related issues. This research is conducted with my postdoc, Dr. Jian Chen, and other collaborators. Based on the most recent data from the Energy Information Administration, Iowa currently has a capacity of about 330 megawatts of utility-scale solar power plants. By utility scale, I mean solar projects greater than 1 million megawatt in capacity. Currently, utility scale solar accounts for about 1.3% of total electricity generation in Iowa. So in comparison, wind accounts for nearly 60% of electricity generation. So there's a big difference there. Based on natural sunlight and land resources, Iowa has great potential in solar energy development. This is a map of where currently the utility scale wind and solar projects are in the state. The blue circles are for wind and the red circles are for solar. The size of the circle indicates generation capacity. We can see that utility scale solar projects are scattered around the state. Solar is growing very rapidly, as shown by this map based on data from EIA. The squares indicate projects in the pipeline. Again, the size of the squares indicate their capacity of generation. As we can see from the map, in a few years, Iowa's solar energy will grow by multiple times. In recent years, the cost of solar electricity generation has reduced substantially. In fact, solar currently represents the most cost-effective option for electricity generation, according to the US EIA. Policy support has been critical for the development of solar. There are supportive policies at the federal level, state, and local level. The renewable energy targets and decarbonization goals of many private entities also further helps solar development. Thus, solar energy development will have significant impacts both at the national level and for local communities. It is estimated that by 2050, over 1,500 gigawatts of electricity generation from solar will be needed to meet the national decarbonization target. Land will be needed, obviously. However, land availability does not constrain solar development, because most of the land that's estimated at most about 0.5% of the contiguous US surface area would be needed for solar development. According to the AFT, American Farmland Trust, about most of the land will come from farm and ranch land. That's where we can have significant concerns. In this setting of rapid solar development and the potential great impacts on local communities, we conducted surveys to understand people's perspectives on large-scale solar projects with a focus on land use issues. We conducted a survey in Iowa and another survey in 6 Great Lakes states. But today, I will mostly report results from our Iowa survey. We collect responses from the general population, public officials, landowners, and non-landowners. We designed the study so that our responses represent all regions of the state, as shown by the map, which indicates that the number of responses by region and by public officials and the general population. So the distribution is about even. For those of you who completed our survey, thank you very much. We greatly appreciate your time and input. Our survey is 8 pages long with many questions. So here, my presentation will just cover some selected questions. One question we asked is, how strongly do you support your community hosting utility-scale solar projects? The chart shows that over 3/4 of the respondents showed at least moderate support, moderate, very, or extreme support. All regions had a largely similar distribution of support. If you look at the chart very carefully, one exception might be the Southeast region, which seemed to have a higher level of support than other regions. To understand people's attitude toward utility-scale solar, it is important to understand what people think of utility-scale solar projects. In particular, what are the main benefits and challenges? So we asked in the survey people's ranking of benefits and challenges. The list of benefits that we asked are presented here, which include increased community reputation as a champion of solar energy development, reduced electricity bill, increased tax revenues, increased resilience during disasters, increased lease payment for landowners, and to others, reduced carbon and air pollution, increased job opportunities. As to the one that's related to land, increased lease payment for landowners, about 33% of the respondents ranked it as extremely important, 42% ranked it as moderately important. We then asked people to rank the most important benefit if their community were to host a solar project. So what we found is that for the land-related benefit, about 3% of the respondents rated increased lease payment for landowners as the most important benefit. The largest part of the pie, that's the green part, is for reduced electricity bill. So most respondents, not most respondents, the highest proportion of respondents ranked reduced electricity bill as the most important benefit from their perspective. And turning to the challenges, we similarly asked the respondents to rank several challenges that we identified, which included lack of clear zoning ordinance, lack of staff with technical knowledge, or lack of favorable public opinions, etc. And we included concerns about land use, which mostly is about loss of farmland. What we found from the data is that over 51% of respondents ranked this concerns about land use as the most significant challenge. So that's here shown as 35%, the orange part of the pie. And following this, it's the blue part, that's 29% for high initial investment costs. We also ask questions about people's personal experience and the knowledge of electricity profile of their community. We ask a lot more detailed questions, but here I will just share a few. So in one question, we asked, do you personally use solar PV panels at your place of residence? So probably it's consistent with our impression while driving around the state. Most people, the vast majority of people, do not have solar PV panels on the roof of their house. and the ones that has PV panels on their residence account for only single-digit % of our respondents. Another question that we asked was, do you plan to install PV solar panel at your place of residence in the next 5 years? This chart shows about 20% of respondents plan to install solar panel in the next 5 years. So if you compare this chart with the previous chart, we would see that the percentage represents a dramatic increase from the current use. So many people among our respondents planned or had the intention of install solar panel on their rooftop. Another question that we asked was, is there a community solar project in your county or city? So basically in your local community. So this is a fact-based question. This is a question using this question, we'd like to know people's knowledge about solar energy use in their locality. What's interesting to us was that if you look at the blue bars, over 50% of the respondent answered that I don't know to the question whether there's a community project in their local community. We think this is very interesting because it indicates the potential or the roles of education and the new information for the respondents. And since our respondents, we think, are quite representative of the state, so this answer this chart indicate how much people know about solar projects, in this case, specifically about community solar projects. We had different questions for public officials. Public officials here mean like county supervisors, zoning board members, and their staff members. We target this group because we think they probably play a larger role in solar energy development in their local communities. One question we asked was, how would you rate the following challenges to your jurisdiction's adoption of solar zoning regulations regarding utility scale solar systems? So for this one, we're not asking for zone for solar or zone against. We were just asking for solar zoning regulations. And the highest combined the somewhat a challenge and a significant challenge was the category different opinions concerning zoning for utility scale solar. And that's followed by the last one, lack of staff with technical knowledge of utility scale solar. So these two categories accounted for significant challenges. About how public officials view in terms of having solar zoning regulations in their local communities. Another question we asked of the local public officials is, what range would you prefer to be the minimum amount of the decommissioning bond? By decommissioning bond, we mean financial resources, specifically money, set aside to restore land that has been used solar, that is at the end of the life of a solar project. Again, kind of interestingly, about 38% of our respondents who were public officials, responded, I do not know. So I guess it was harder. It was harder to come up with a specific number about how much money would be needed to set aside to restore land to their original conditions. Otherwise, the answers seem to spread around between $1 to $2,000 per acre up to above $10,000 per acre. Another important aspect of zoning regulations is the setback from other properties. There are different setbacks from road, setbacks from residential properties, etc. But here for this question, we asked, what, in your opinion, is the ideal setback from a non-participating parcel to the solar array? So for this one, most respondents at least seem to have an opinion, have an estimate about what the setback should be, unlike the decommissioning bond. Again, the answers seem to be evenly distributed from very short or very small setback, 1 foot to 50 feet, to the last category above 300 feet. It's a little bit bimodal, not too much. It's like whether some respondents preferred maybe a smaller setback, whereas 26% of the respondents replied as above 300 feet. This is a very important parameter for solar energy projects because this would determine how much total land would be required for a solar project. Obviously, more land would mean higher cost for the solar project. We also asked public officials, how do you rate your current knowledge level about the regulation of utility-scale solar development? Again, interestingly, here we have about 59% of public officials responded that they had a low level of knowledge. This seemed to be a recurring theme in our survey that people, both public officials and the general population, didn't seem to think that they know the topic enough to answer some of our questions. With low level of knowledge, so we'd consider that there will be a role for information provision. So in order for that, we first understand the knowledge level and the support by different stakeholders. So knowledge level might or might not affect people's support for different utility scale solar. So for the 4 groups of stakeholders we considered are public officials versus general population, landowners versus non-landowners. From this table, we can see that public officials and landowners seem to report that they know more about utility scale solar than general population and non-landowner respondents. And the second column shows the degree of support. So public officials and landowners seem to have a higher support than general population and non-landowner. These numbers are on a scale of 5, so 1 to 5, from do not support versus extremely support. Very low knowledge level versus very knowledgeable. So that's what these numbers are about. The numbers in parentheses are standard deviations, showing the accuracy, how widely the opinions or the answers were. For information provision, we did some simple experiment. So we divided our survey survey sample into 4 groups. 1/4 of our sample or respondents received no information. 1/4 of our respondents received a 1-paragraph description with an emphasis on their peer information, basically about what other states are doing. And for the rest, 50%, half received positive information. So basically 1 paragraph describing all the benefits that a solar project could provide for their community. And 1/4 received information about with an emphasis on the negative impact of solar projects. All information provided is factually correct based on what we know, although with the different information treatments just mean different emphases. So for this one, Just with one simple paragraph description in a survey, we could observe significant differences in the impact on attitude. So after the paragraph, we made sure that the respondents read the paragraph we provided. How did we make sure? We tested them. So we actually included 2 test questions specifically about the paragraph we provided. If they didn't pass the 2 tests we provided, they wouldn't be included in our survey. So we made sure that people read the information we provided. With that information treatment, we found that on average, a quarter of our respondents who received positive information showed higher degree of support for their community to host a utility-scale solar than people who received negative information. We also found that it's not provided here that negative information tend to have a larger effect than positive information. And the information treatments also have impacts in other aspects, but I'm not going to go into detail here. So implications for land and agriculture. Reuters had one article early this year, and in their article, they mentioned solar leases in Indiana and the surrounding states can offer a lease payment of around $900 to $1,500 an acre per year in land rent. I think most people in the audience probably have a sense about what's the average cash rent in Iowa. I think it's probably about $250 per acre, depending on land quality. So that's a big difference between cash rent if you grow corn, soybean versus lease payment if you use land for solar projects. There are many other considerations other than just lease payment. What would be the overall demand for land? I showed in my early slides that a study like NREL, the National Renewable Energy Lab, showed that only about 0.5% of the country's contiguous land would be required to provide solar energy for the country. However, the impacts are all local. So consider if a small community has one solar project or a couple of solar projects on the scale of at least 200 acres. And when you drive around, you can see that a large impact. Also, as more land is being used for solar, not used for communities, it's going to have ramifications on agribusinesses, on seed, fertilizer, marketing facilities in the community. The impacts go beyond the land that's being used for solar projects itself. Especially solar projects are likely going to affect the value of neighboring land. In addition to land values, the solar projects could also have a significant impact on soil and water quality. This obviously will depend on what the land under the solar panels are going to be used for. Here at Iowa State, we have a research project aimed to provide information regarding the dual use, or you may say multiple use, of land under the solar panel. So the land under the solar panel can be left bare, or you can still grow crops, or you can have grass covers. So it really depends how the land is going to be used. Here's one picture that was used in the Reuters article I mentioned earlier. So if land is left bare and if the topsoil is scraped during the construction stage, it will have very different soil and water quality and other environmental implications. On the other hand, land under the solar panel or surrounding the solar projects can be used in different ways. So in this case, it can be left for perennial grass. This is a personal picture of mine for our local community, which is Ames, the first community solar farm. I drove by one day and I saw sheep. That's the white spot. Sorry, I had to take a picture far away. There's fence around the solar panels. I couldn't get very close. The white spots on the ground are sheep grazing under the solar panels. So this will have very different environmental implications as to a bare ground. Also, solar farms can be integrated with beekeeping. On our Alliant Energy solar farm, the Alliant Energy solar farm at Iowa State, we're experimenting to see how bee production can take place, can be integrated into solar energy production. Land under the solar panel can also be used for crops. So on our solar farm, we're testing how vegetables, squash, peppers, broccoli grow under the solar panel, and also testing fruits like strawberries and other like raspberries, etc., to grow under or around the solar panels. Our project is at the early stage. We're just into the first year, and we're excited to see how solar can be integrated with agricultural or other ecological services. And that's the last of my slides, and I hope the information provided will be good food for thought for you. I'll take questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Feng. If you want to go ahead and advance a few slides. While folks are getting their questions entered into the chat, again, if you have attended this webinar and would like a CCA continuing education unit, please send the following information on this slide to Alena Whitaker, that's ALENAW at iastate.edu by 5 p.m. this evening. That includes your name, the name you used to watch the webinar if it's different, and then your CCA number so that we can make sure that we get your credit submitted and you get that recorded on your account. All right, up next, we also are asking folks to complete a voluntary demographic survey. You can do this one of two ways. You can either open the survey using a QR code there on the screen, simply scan that with your phone, take you to a short survey, or you can enter in that URL, iowalearningfarms.org/survey. Only one response is needed for a calendar year. So if you've already completed it for 2024, thank you. And if you have not, we do encourage you to consider completing that demographic survey. Next week, go ahead. We have a new faculty member here in the Agricultural and Biosystems Engineering Department, Ryan McGahee. He's an assistant professor, and he's going to be talking about conservation planning and erosivity, a brief review and forecast of what is to come. So that sounds very intriguing. And I know there were a few questions early on about getting access to this presentation. And so I did submit in the chat the link to our direct website, but here you can find those URLs as well. If you search iowalearningfarms.org/webinars, that will take you to our dedicated webpage where you can find links to the archive dating back all the way to 2011. And we also have our newer archive available on YouTube, so you can find all of the 2023-2024 webinars there sorted by both year and topic. So you can easily find the webinar you are in search of. So with that, there have been some questions. So let me see here. So this person is curious about possibly doing some utility solar on their property in Johnson County. I know your focus here was on survey data, but any advice on who or where they should start to possibly get this conversation rolling about getting a utility solar farm area on their property?
Great question. And the person who asked the question indicated, I'm not sure that's my area of expertise, but I think I would definitely contact the local officials first to see what are the proper procedures to get started, the permitting process. So far, I've heard that many of the solar projects were actually initiated by developers. Because obviously they are critical in terms of decide where they would like a project going on. So they probably will approach, some of them would approach landowners, some of them would approach local officials. And for local officials, because there are so many permits to be obtained, land use, and then by the time the electricity, the solar panels before the solar panels be constructed, there would be construction permits, electricity, and also the hooking up with the grid. There are so many paperwork to be done. So I think the local officials would like themselves to be the first stop, but many utility developers will bypass that. I think landowners can also initiate that. Talking to your neighbors, look around would be important. Why? Because I think in addition to the land itself, it's very important to see how the electricity can be connected to grid, to be the electricity infrastructure. If the infrastructure is not there, it's going to be harder for the for land to be identified as important for solar development.
Excellent. So yeah, keep those questions coming in via the chat. There's a couple questions here about definitions of a couple of the groups that were surveyed. For landowners, where you can, in that group, was it both local, so those still residing in the area, and the typical, they assumed absentee landowner that maybe isn't local or maybe has relocated elsewhere in the country?
That is a great question. We'll definitely investigate. We did ask another category that I didn't present. It's about actively farming, like agricultural operators. That probably will answer the question indirectly in the sense that we have found a high correlation between landowners and agricultural operators. So at least in our sample, I understand not in general for the state, that landowners and agricultural operators seem to coincide, which would indicate that these landowners are likely living in the local community.
And then if you can clear the definition of your non-landowners, who are they?
We have some other demographics to answer that question. How we identify them, it's self-declared. So we ask one question: do you own farmland? Are you actually farming? Those are the two questions we identify people as farmers or landowners. So it's self-identified.
And maybe this is related to our earlier conversation. Someone's looking into doing some agrivoltaic research. You mentioned in some of the photos there that these are Department of Energy projects. So they're just curious what funding sources to look into and or supported this research.
So our research is supported by DOE. It's a public, but it's also a public and a private ownership. So the Alliant Energy is an active partner. They actually own the structure. So they are the investors. They're actually you may say renting ISU land, and our project is mostly for research purposes. So all of the crops you saw and all of the solar panels are being closely monitored because there are so few projects like ours, and there's so little information about how solar panels will affect crops grown under or surrounding it, and how crops will actually affect solar panel energy production as well, because these are region specific. Just because research has been done in Europe, in Asia, or even in Southwest United States, their answers do not necessarily apply to the Middle Western region. So as far as I know, we are either one of the first projects in the Middle West to see how vegetables and how fruits can be integrated into a solar farm. And we only have 1 year data, and as it's only September, we have not measured all of the output yet. I know there are significant differences, but I don't think we have compiled my collaborators, not me, I'm an economist. So those would be the vegetables and the fruits that would be were conducted by our horticulture professors and entomologists, and also the solar panels are engineers, electrical engineers, etc. It's a very large interdisciplinary project. So we measure and we monitor cost benefits and actual energy and crop production very closely for research purpose in order to answer questions exactly like that. We'll be happy if people reach to us, and if they want to know how crops grow under, will be great. We'll be happy to answer questions based on what we know. But so far, as far as I know, there's very little evidence that that's directly applicable to the Middle Western agriculture setting.
So it sounds like we have some future webinar presenters and topics that can explore this project as it matures. Okay, so this person commented that it looked at if there's, as if in some regions, there was more supportive to solar than others. Were you able to pull out any data on why those discrepancies exist? Is that within the realm of this survey project?
That's definitely it's a question we would like to explore. So far we have overall on average we have found that people, including both public officials and the general population, when they have self-reported, they know more about solar, they seem to be more supportive. In addition, we also count the I don't know, I'm not sure. We also count those answers in each respondent. Those who clicked more I don't knows, more I'm not so sure, seem to have, on average, seem to show less support for utility scale solar. So it looks like knowledge level will be critical. And that being said, that obviously knowledge is also very different. Some people may focus on positive knowledge, positive impact, or negative impact. So we have not quite finished our data analysis yet. Just for the figure I showed, the Southeast seemed to have demonstrated a higher support, a greater support for utility scale solar. And if you remember the map of the distribution of solar versus wind, you'll see that Southeast is relatively the map is relatively empty, you may say, about wind energy project, and they do have some larger utility scale solar energy projects over there. So I think personal experience, what they see, what they experience may matter. We have found that people who have a residential PV solar panels installed on their rooftop, they seem to definitely show a higher support for utility scale solar. What else? Yeah, we would like to dig more into our data. As I said, that thanks to the respondents, they did answer 8 pages, 7 pages of question with a cover page of questions. We have tons of information. Yes.
Yeah, so and then there's a lot of questions coming in and about solar specifics. So I apologize if we won't get to all of them. I'm trying to focus on ones most directly tied to the data shared today. So this person noted that some of the opposition to solar farms by neighbors cite local issues. Did you find any details about local issues? Was there any way for folks to put any answers in of their own, or were these all survey where they possible answers were selected from, like multiple choice versus open-ended?
Great question. We got some comments, but no, we have not. We do not have a data or analyzing the comments about the exactly and how or why people rated the land use concern, which we indicated as a loss of farmland. Why would people be concerned about that? That's the next level of of a question. So we no, that's we will have a follow-up survey. I hope people will respond. But so far, no, it's a great question. So why are you concerned about why land use is such a big concern? It's a great question. No, we do not. I do not have an answer here today, even though I can have you lots of conjectures. But you probably the audience probably has much conjectures as I do.
So my own follow-up question, you're
Yeah.
obviously still in the analysis phase of this data. You're going to get a follow-up. Uh, if folks have follow-up questions or are looking for more detailed timeline, potentially to look for a report and or who to contact with those questions.
Mm-hmm. So I'm at the Department of Economics. I'm also an affiliate of CARD. So many people in Iowa or maybe in the audience have heard CARD. So we have a website. We did put a little bit news release. That's one pager summary about our survey. In terms of a timeline, we could. It's not a promise. I think we could have a report out by the end of the year. We also did a similar survey for the Great Lakes region, by the way. So for Iowa we have 860 responses, 868 responses. For the Great Lakes region, we collected over 3,000 responses. We showed similar the attitude and perceptions are very similar. For example, about 3/4 of the respondents showed at least moderate support for utility scale solar. That's very interesting. There, we also focused on rural versus urban as well. Yeah, so we have manuscripts. Manuscripts take longer to come out because it has to go through the peer review process. And it's also harder to predict when the peers, which are anonymous, will complete the review. Once that's done, yeah, the results will be posted as public knowledge.
And maybe something to consider, there's a comment here about possibly livestock producers putting the panels on barn roofs or other structures that are already on the farm versus land that would be producing crops. So another aspect to maybe consider. And something along the lines of demographics here, are you able to determine if those that are actively farming are landowners versus non-operating landowners? So I think you alluded to that when you asked
Yeah.
whether they're actively farming.
Yeah. That I think based on the high correlation. So we asked two questions, one after another. Do you own farmland? Are you a farm operator? I forgot the exact wording. So if we do a correlation of those two, they are highly correlated, which would mean a large percentage are both landowners and operators. Because it's Iowa, I think the audience will understand that many of the public officials are also landowners as well, because public officials are county supervisors, and if you go to rural communities, it's likely they're local leaders in terms of county supervisors, city managers, zoning board members. Those are likely people who probably also farm, also farm or own farmland. We have lots of rural population.
And to kind of in that demographic pool, did you notice any key differences based on respondents' gender? Did you ask gender and did you notice any response differences?
On top of my head, I don't know. I know on top of my head, I think there's not significant difference. However, great question. We have not focused on that. We were focused on the four subpopulations I have mentioned. I think females slightly higher should have slightly higher support, and also I know nowadays it can be people can have very polarized views. I can add that we did ask political affiliation. So for people who self-identified as Democrats, they seem to show a higher support. Yeah, for the utility scale solar. I'd like to add a little bit of information, Liz. I think from part of the question you mentioned, it seems that some people may be considering smaller projects than what we considered. So in Iowa, there are still about a third, about 33% of solar energy actually comes from smaller solar projects. Like people mentioned, solar panels on their on their barns, or even rooftop solar, which I mentioned multiple times. However, we actually the utility scale solar projects do not usually include you include those projects. We mean larger, meaning at least 1 megawatt, 1 megawatt. The reason I mentioned the rooftop solar is in the context that when people have that type of energy, or they know more about even that type of solar energy, they seem to be more supportive of larger scale solar projects. Yeah, so our study does not cover the smaller ones. Yeah.
All right. So these aren't necessarily questions, but some folks had mentioned that Purdue and even at the University of Minnesota Morris and a place out in Colorado are also looking into the agrivoltaic solar installations and that interaction of agronomy, soil, and these larger scale solar projects. So we're talking beyond roof and personal use projects.
Yeah.
All right. So with that, if folks want to learn more about this project, about the agrivoltaic project going on at Iowa State, you can find Dr. Hongli and the team through Iowa State, looking either at CARD, so the Center for Agricultural and Rural Development, or ISU Economics Department, and continue the conversation. And she can maybe connect you with other members of the team for some of those more specific questions I know that came in regards to the management of the spaces underneath the solar panels themselves. So we appreciate, Dr. Feng, you sharing the results of this survey and kind of getting a snapshot of current views on this large scale solar, utility solar here in Iowa, and look forward to future updates as you gather more follow-up survey results and this demonstration project here at Iowa State continues. And with that, I will give you the final word of the presentation.
Yeah, I'm glad that one of the listeners mentioned the project in Colorado and Purdue and etc. Yeah, there is one project that looked at how corn and soybean would grow, but that would require quite a bit of modification in terms of height of the panel and structures. That would add significant amount of cost. Yes, research is being conducted. So far, I welcome everybody to come to visit our solar farm at Iowa State. We host many tours. Literally, that's not an exaggeration. So just give us a call or email me if you want more information, or if you are in town for a football game, etc. You want to take a tour of our solar farm, we'll be happy to talk about it. Yeah, thank
Excellent.
you.
Well, yeah. And thank you so much, and thank you everyone for tuning in today. Have a great afternoon.
Bye-bye.